The spy and the seduction. She couldn't take her eyes off him. He walked in like a whisper call, controlled, invisible. Not a single head turned when he entered. He wasn't dressed to impress. No loud colors, no designer logos. He didn't smile. He didn't scan the room like a man hunting attention. But within minutes, she saw him. Not once, not twice, but again and again, until she couldn't stop looking. She didn't even know why. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't even looked her way, yet something about him demanded her attention, like gravity. At first, she tried to ignore it. But then he passed by, paused, and said just one short sentence low, relaxed, without trying. And in that instant, her entire body language shifted. Her posture softened. Her eyes widened, just slightly. And for the rest of the night, her focus was anchored to him. Now, here's what's strange. He didn't compliment her. He didn't flirt. He didn't try to make her laugh. What he said was almost irrelevant. It was how he said it. The weight, the call, the rhythm. It felt less like conversation and more like a pulse she couldn't resist. He wasn't an actor. He wasn't a natural-born seducer. In fact, this man had spent more time in classified briefings than on dating apps. Why? Because he was a CIA, field operative, and what happened that night wasn't charm. It wasn't luck. It was training. You see, in the intelligence world, agents are taught how to win trust under pressure. In hostile territory, surrounded by lies, suspicion, and danger, you don't get second chances. You either connect or you fail. So the CIA trains its operatives to communicate differently, to speak in ways that bypass logic and tap straight into the subconscious. Not manipulation, not hypnosis, but something far more subtle and far more powerful. They call it a conversation hack, a dark framework designed to trigger emotional openness without the other person realizing it's happening. It's used to disarm targets, build rapport in seconds, and make people lower their guard, not by force, but by invitation. This isn't fiction. It's not some James Bond fantasy. It's real. It's psychological. And it works, not just in war zones or foreign missions, but in everyday interactions, even in a cafe, even with a woman who's heard it all before. And here's the twist. You don't have to be a spy to use it. Most men struggle in conversations with women because they focus on impressing. They talk too much. They explain. They perform. But the truth? Women don't fall for explanations. They fall for feelings, for the way someone makes them feel about themselves, about the moment, about the mystery. That's why some guys who say all the right things still get ghosted, and why others, with barely a sentence, stay stuck in her mind for weeks. It's not about content. It's about connection. And connection has a structure. That structure, if you know how to build it, is what separates noise from impact, boys from men, and conversation from seduction. The man in our story didn't use tricks. He used understanding. He knew how to steer emotion like a compass. He knew how to plant curiosity without pushing. He knew how to speak not to her ears, but to something deeper, something unguarded. And that's why she kept looking. That's why she leaned in. That's why, long after he left, she was still wondering, what was it about him? This video is going to show you exactly what it is. Not theory, not fluff. A psychological roadmap used by elite operatives to create magnetic conversations that bypass resistance, ignite curiosity, and generate a type of attraction most men never access. You'll understand why your words don't land. You'll discover how to unlock her attention without chasing it. And most importantly, you'll learn how to create emotional tension that keeps her mind coming back to you long after the conversation ends. If you've ever felt invisible, If you've ever felt like your voice doesn't matter, or like you're saying the right things but getting nowhere, what you're missing isn't charm. It's structure. It's precision. And once you have it, you'll never approach a conversation the same way again. So lean in, because what I'm about to share with you may be the most powerful skill you'll ever learn as a man. The cold truth. Why women feel bored around you. Let's strip away the fluff and get brutally honest. If you've ever sat across from a woman, told a story, made a joke, asked a question, and still felt like her mind was somewhere else, you're not alone. You're not broken. But you are likely making a silent, invisible mistake that almost every man makes. A mistake that isn't obvious. A mistake you weren't warned about. And yet, it's costing you everything. So here's the truth, raw and cold. Most women aren't bored by you because of what you say. They're bored because of how you make them feel nothing. It's not rejection. It's not even dislike. It's something worse. Emotional neutrality. That dead zone where the brain doesn't react. Where she listens, but doesn't lean in. Where she smiles, but doesn't feel moved. Where she replies, but forgets the moment you walk away. This is the social graveyard where most men's conversations go to die. And the worst part? You rarely even know it's happening until it's too late. Let me paint the picture. You match with her. The chat starts. She's responsive. You ask questions. You tell her about your weekend. You mention something you're passionate about. She replies, haha, nice, or cool. Or maybe she double taps your message with a heart and disappears. You think, what happened? I was being polite. I was being honest. I didn't do anything wrong. And you're right. You didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't do anything memorable. And that's the danger, because today, attention isn't given. It's stolen. Interest isn't earned slowly. It's seized emotionally. You're not just competing with other men. You're competing with her phone. Her DMIS, her anxiety, her attention span, her emotional walls, her busy, overstimulated brain. So if what you say doesn't spark something inside her, guess what? She doesn't even consciously choose to drift away. Her brain just does. Automatically. You become background noise. Like an elevator playlist. Smooth, predictable, easy to forget. Or let me put it this way. You are the Spotify playlist she skips after 3 seconds. Not because the song is bad, but because it doesn't pull her into the mood she's craving. Think about that for a second. Because this right here, this is the brutal pattern most men live inside. They say what they've been told is polite. They try to be interesting. They stay in the safe zone. And by doing so, they never make a dent. Now here's what makes it even trickier. No one tells you what you're doing wrong. She doesn't say, hey, you're a nice guy, but you're not emotionally charging this conversation. She just fades. Silently, instinctively, and you're left staring at a blank screen, asking yourself, was it me? Did I say too much? Not enough? But let me offer you something powerful. A shift. A new lens. What if the goal of conversation wasn't to be liked? What if it wasn't to sound smart, or funny, or agreeable? What if the goal was to stir her? Emotional waters just enough that she has to lean closer? Because here's the pattern you need to break. You're trying to impress her brain, but her brain doesn't choose desire. Her body does. Her nervous system does. Her gut reaction does. So when your words don't create a feeling, when your presence doesn't shift her emotional state, even slightly, she tunes out. Not rudely, not consciously, just naturally. Now, I want you to reflect for a second. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling like you did everything right, but nothing landed? How many times have you heard, you're Such a good guy, or I had fun, followed by silence. And how many times have you blamed yourself or her, or just shrugged it off as bad luck? The truth is deeper and more liberating than you think. You're not failing because you lack value. You're failing because you're delivering value in the wrong currency. You're giving logic when she's craving emotional resonance. You're giving facts when her body is waiting for feeling. You're giving clarity when mystery is what activates desire. That's not your fault. It's how we've all been taught. Speak clearly. Be confident. Be polite. Be stable. And in most areas of life, that works. In job interviews, at family dinners, on LinkedIn. But in romantic energy and attraction, it falls flat. It doesn't move the dial. It doesn't shake the nervous system awake. Because emotional chemistry isn't built with facts. It's built with friction, with tension, with unexpected patterns that keep the nervous system engaged. Women aren't biologically designed to be impressed by safety. They are drawn to the edges, to men who can touch emotion without apology, who can stir curiosity, not with force, but with presence. And if you can't do that, not because you're bad, but because you were never taught how, then every word you speak becomes just another skipped track in her playlist. But here's the good news. This can be changed. And we're about to break it down step by step, because the problem isn't you. It's how you were trained to talk. And if we rewire that pattern, you won't just get her attention. You'll finally understand how to hold it with depth, with presence, with power. The hidden pain, when you feel invisible. Let's pause the analysis for a moment and talk about something more human. I want you to remember a moment. Maybe it was recent. Maybe it was years ago. You were speaking to a woman. You were doing your best, genuinely trying to connect. You were telling a story, or sharing a memory, or asking a question you thought mattered. And then you saw it, that flicker in her eyes, the glance at her phone, the polite smile that didn't quite reach, her face, the soft, distant, yeah, totally, followed by silence. And in that moment, you felt it. You were no longer in the room. You were physically there, but emotionally, you had vanished. That moment, that ache in your chest, it stays long after the night ends, long after you tell yourself it wasn't a big deal. But deep down, something gets quieter inside you. Something says, maybe I'm just not the kind of man women feel that with. And that voice, it starts to echo. It shows up the next time you try. It tells you to hold back, to stay guarded, to not try too hard. Because what's the point, right? You've already felt what it's like to speak and not be heard. This right here is the wound no one talks about. The private pain that millions of men carry. Not of rejection, but of emptiness, of being seen, but not felt, of showing up and disappearing in real time. We don't have words for it. There's no diagnosis, no support group, but it's real. And it shapes how we walk through the world. We start adjusting. We become careful, polite. We play it safe in conversations. We stop taking risks with what we say. We shrink our emotional range, hoping that if we at least stay pleasant, we won't be ignored again. But here's the tragedy. The more we play it safe, the more invisible we become. Because connection doesn't happen in safety. It happens in risk, in vulnerability, in emotional leadership. Let me give you a metaphor. You're standing at the edge of a lake. You want her to look at you, to feel you. So you toss a pebble into the water. It makes a small ripple, but it's not enough. So you toss another and another. Little stories, little jokes, little questions. All safe, all soft, all forgettable. But what you don't realize is that she's not looking for pebbles. She's waiting for a splash. Something bold, different, something that wakes the water, that shakes the surface. And you've been taught all your life not to make splashes, to avoid offending, avoid discomfort, to keep things light, neutral, nice. But nice doesn't stir emotion. Nice doesn't create memory. Nice doesn't make her sit up at 2 a.m., replaying your words in her mind. You want to know the real reason she didn't respond? Because you never reached her. You reached her ears, but not her gut. You reached her brain, but not her body. And that's the part she responds to. That's the part that whispers, "There's something about him." It's not about making her laugh. It's not about being smooth. It's about disrupting her default emotional state, interrupting her inner monologue, forcing her, for just a second, to feel something unexpected. That might be surprise, might be fascination, might even be a subtle discomfort that makes her curious. But it has to be something, because the opposite of attraction isn't rejection. It's indifference, and indifference is silent. It doesn't attack, it fades. Now, let's get even more honest. How many times have you felt like a placeholder? Like she was just passing time with you? Like she was present, but only until someone more exciting showed up? That feeling, it cuts, because it confirms the fear. I'm not enough. But what if I told you the fear is misplaced? Because it's not you who's not enough. It's the version of you that's been trained to speak without risk, without color, without emotional boldness. And that's not your fault. You were taught that being a good guy meant staying in line. But staying in line doesn't create attraction. It creates comfort. And comfort is great for friendships. But desire lives in the edge. It lives in emotional electricity. And to access that, you have to stop fearing the splash. But here's where it gets even more brutal. Over time, the silence starts to speak louder than words. The absence of real connection doesn't just hurt, it starts to define you. You begin to internalize the pattern. And without realizing it, you carry it from one interaction to the next. You become the man who no longer expects to be chosen, who downplays his desire before it's even expressed, who censors his voice, not because he's weak, but because the world trained him to be palatable. You learn to survive, but not to stir. You learn to manage conversations, but not to lead them. And maybe deep down you start to believe something toxic, that the kind of emotional connection you want just isn't meant for you. That maybe you're just not that guy. Let me be very clear. That belief, it's a lie. You are not invisible. You have depth, fire, tension. You have stories that can electrify the room if you tell them from the right place. You have presence. That could silence the noise around her if you stop trying to earn approval and start creating experience. You don't need to change who you are. You need to change how you show up emotionally. And this is the turning point. Women don't want the most interesting man in the room. They want the man who makes them feel most interesting when they're with him. Read that again. She's not looking for a performance. She's looking for resonance. Someone who can move her, not just with clever lines, but with unspoken understanding, with contrast, with timing, with boldness. But to create that, you need to get out of your head. You need to stop editing every sentence. You need to stop fearing silence. You need to stop trying to get her to like you. Because the moment your energy is driven by her approval, you've lost polarity. Attraction needs tension. And tension needs one person to lead emotionally. Not forcefully, not loudly, but with certainty. It means you're not just reacting to her vibe, you're shaping it. You're not waiting for chemistry. You're engineering it, not with gimmicks, but with your ability to guide the emotional rhythm of the moment. That rhythm doesn't come from memorized lines. It comes from presence, from noticing the shifts in her tone, from holding eye contact 2 seconds longer than comfortable, from asking the question that no one else dares to ask, from pausing instead of filling the space. These are micro moves, but they create macro attraction. And the best part? They're all learnable. Once you start viewing attraction not as magic, but as psychology, everything changes. You begin to understand what no one ever taught you. That connection isn't just something you find. It's something you generate, but only if you stop trying to be impressive and start becoming emotionally intentional. Let me close this part with a confession. The biggest regret most men have isn't being rejected. It's knowing they never really showed up as their full, unedited self. They kept it small, safe, palatable, and in doing so, they were never truly seen. So they live in a constant loop of being almost chosen, almost remembered, almost felt. That life, it's slow death, because deep down you don't want to be liked. You want to be felt. You want to be that conversation that lives rent-free in her mind for days. That energy she can't quite define, but can't forget either. And here's the twist. It's not that you're boring. It's not that you're not attractive. It's not that you're not that guy. It's that you've been trying to connect through logic while her body is wired for emotion. You've been speaking English to a heart that only understands music. And now, it's time to learn that music. The dark hack. How CI, a conversation tactics, make her want you. She's not drawn to your words. She's drawn to the emotions you trigger. Step 1. Emotion anchoring. So here we are. The moment of shift. You've walked through the silence, the confusion, the invisible ache. But now it's time to learn what actually works. Because when you stop chasing attention and start engineering emotional experience, everything changes. And the first step? It starts with anchoring emotion. This is called emotion anchoring, a technique used by CIA, field agents, to create trust and resonance in high-stakes interactions. But don't let the term intimidate you. It's not a magic trick. It's a structured emotional move, and once you understand it, you'll never go back to normal conversations again. So what is it? Emotion anchoring is the ability to intentionally create an emotional state in the other person, and then link that emotion to you. Let me repeat that, because it's important. You create the emotional state, and you become the anchor point of that state in her memory. That's how CIA agents build trust. Not by giving information, but by shaping emotion. Because emotion is sticky. It's how the brain tags experiences. People don't remember what you said. They remember how they felt around you. And if you're the one who caused that feeling, you become unforgettable. Now, here's where most guys go wrong. They try to impress her logically, or they wait for her to feel something organically, or they hope chemistry just happens. That's passive. That's random. We don't want random. We want deliberate. So here's how you do it. Instead of asking neutral, robotic questions like, "So, how long have you lived here?" Try something like this. "What's something that made you laugh so hard recently you almost cried?" Or, "When was the last time you felt fully alive, like nothing else in the world mattered? What are you doing here?" You're guiding her into an emotional memory. You're unlocking a state inside her nervous system. And while she's reliving that laughter or joy or adrenaline, who's standing in front of her? You are. You're not just the guy she's talking to. You're now connected to that state of pleasure. And that's how the anchor forms. Her brain will associate the feeling with you. And here's where it gets deeper. Once she's inside that emotion, don't rush. Don't move on. Don't joke. Don't pivot. Let it breathe. Say something like, "I can actually see it in your face right now. You light up just remembering it." That one sentence does two things. One, it deepens the emotion She's feeling point two. It makes her feel seen in a way most men never do. And when a woman feels seen not just physically, but emotionally, her entire body softens. Her guard drops. Her mirror neurons light up. She feels safe and stimulated at the same time. That's not just attraction. That's connection on a cellular level. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine you're at a rooftop bar. It's early evening, music low, sunset behind her. Instead of doing the usual, so what do? Routine. You say, "You seem like someone who notices little details. Like, maybe sunsets feel different to you than they do for most people." She pauses. Her expression shifts. Maybe she smiles. Maybe she blushes. But the energy changes. Why? Because you just named a possibility inside her. Something she wants to believe about herself. And in doing so, you gave her a feeling. A moment of recognition, of intimacy, of story. Now, do you see what's happening? You're not just talking. You're shaping her internal state. You're giving her a small emotional high anchored to your presence. And here's the best part. Most guys don't do this. They never even think about it. So when you walk into her life and start creating feelings intentionally, without pressure, without neediness, you stand out like electricity in a room full of static. You don't have to be louder. You don't have to be better looking. You just have to be the one who makes her feel something deeper than surface noise. That's the power of anchoring. It's not loud. It's not obvious, but it's undeniably real. And once she feels it, once she links that emotion to your presence, her nervous system remembers you, even if her logic tries to forget. Step 2, the curiosity hook. If emotion is the glue that makes her remember you, curiosity is the thread that keeps her coming back. You've probably heard it before. Curiosity is more powerful than desire. Because when someone is curious, they become active. They lean in. They ask. They wonder. And wonder is addictive. That's why step 2 in the Dark Conversation Hack is what CIA agents call the curiosity hook, the ability to insert just enough unknown into the moment. But the other person feels pulled forward by an invisible thread. Now here's the secret. Curiosity doesn't come from facts. It comes from incompleteness, from stories left hanging, from patterns broken mid-sentence, from meaning that's hinted at but never fully explained. Let me show you how that works in practice. Let's say she asks you, "So, what brought you to this city?" You could give a logical answer. "Oh, work, better opportunities, better weather, dead, end, safe." Or you could say, "It's actually kind of a weird story, one that starts with a mistake." And then you pause. In that pause, you've done something subtle but powerful. You've interrupted the pattern of expected answers. You've planted a question in her mind. What was the mistake? What happened? Why is he smiling like that? Now you own her attention. And you haven't even told the story yet. Why? Because the human brain hates open loops. It needs to close them. And the moment you introduce a gap in the narrative, the other person subconsciously invests in filling it in. This is how CIA agents build rapport, not with details, but with mystery. They give just enough information to trigger interest and hold the rest in tension. You can use this in dozens of ways. Instead of saying, "I had a pretty normal childhood," say, "I grew up in a house full of secrets. It taught me things most people never learn until much later." That line doesn't explain anything, and that's the point. It doesn't close the loop. It opens one, and that opening, that's where her attention slips in. Now, this isn't about manipulation. You're not trying to trick her. You're simply activating her mind. You're breaking the autopilot she's been on all day. You're offering something unscripted in a world drowning in small talk. That alone makes you rare. But when combined with the emotion you've already anchored from step 1, you become magnetic. She doesn't know why she wants to know more. She just feels it. And here's a key move. Once you've hooked her curiosity, don't give her everything. This is a mistake most guys make. They get one spark of attention, then overshare trying to maintain it. But curiosity dies in overexposure. You want to offer pieces, not the whole puzzle. Let her ask. Let her work a little. Let the tension build. Because when she starts leaning forward, tilting her head, asking, "What do you mean?" You're no longer chasing her attention. She's now chasing your story. And that right, there is the reversal that changes the entire dynamic. You go from the guy seeking validation to the guy who carries a world inside him and only shares it with those who earn it. That energy, it's intoxicating because it signals depth. It says, there's more here than I'm showing you. And nothing activates the feminine more than the sense that a man is both present and guarding something powerful beneath. The surface. That's the essence of the curiosity hook. And once you master it, she won't just remember the conversation. She replay it. Because the questions you planted won't leave her mind. Step 3. Looping mystery. If curiosity gets her attention, mystery keeps it. The human brain is addicted to patterns, but even more addicted to patterns it can't fully solve. That's where the looping mystery comes in. Used by spies to build deep trust with targets over multiple encounters. This technique keeps someone psychologically hooked not through force, but through controlled uncertainty. It works like this. You begin a story. You introduce tension. You withhold the resolution. And when she least expects it, you loop back in. Let me show you how it works. Imagine you're talking and you say, it's funny. I had this moment in Lisbon a few years ago that kind of changed the way I think about trust. But I'll get to that later. Then move on, just like that. Talk about something else. Let the moment breathe. But what did you just do? You opened a loop that now lives in her awareness. A question mark waiting to be closed. She won't forget it, because her brain has now assigned it emotional weight. You didn't just tell a travel story. You suggested that something shifted in you, that there's a version of you she hasn't met yet. And because you didn't finish it, she's now waiting. But you don't resolve it right away. Instead, you drop in a few more mini loops. Another sentence that hints at something real. There was a night when I realized I was way too comfortable with being misunderstood. But that's another conversation. Now she's curious about Lisbon. She's curious about this night. She's curious about this version of you that seems to carry a hidden story. And here's where it gets powerful. Eventually, when she's relaxed, engaged, leaning in, you loop back. You say something like, "Earlier, you asked about trust. Lisbon taught me that some people lie better when they actually believe what they're saying." Boom. You just closed the loop. Not with a long-winded story, but with a sentence that feels heavy, cinematic, unforgettable. That's the power of mystery and rhythm. It's not about withholding forever. It's about managing timing. It's about revealing just enough to reward attention, but never enough to feel predictable. Now, why does this work? Because most people speak in straight lines, linear, obvious, safe. But when you introduce loops, you create a narrative gravity, a reason to stay, a reason to listen deeper, a reason to invest. And here's the hidden truth. Women don't just fall for stories. They fall for storytellers who lead them into the unknown. When you speak with looped tension, you shift her from listener to participant. She's not just hearing the story, she's waiting for the next piece. And that anticipation? That's what burns you into her memory. Let's take another example. Instead of saying, "I had a rough relationship last year," you say, "Last year, I almost let someone convince me I didn't deserve to be fully seen. But I'm still unpacking that. Then change the subject. Later in the conversation, maybe she asks about it. Or maybe you just say, "It's weird how you can share your whole self with someone and still feel invisible." That's not just a sentence. That's a callback. That's a loop reopened. And every time you loop back, you're building depth, emotion, and identity. You become layered. Not confusing, but intriguing. Because here's the bottom line. Predictability kills desire. It makes people feel safe, but not moved. Mystery, when used intentionally, makes her nervous system wake up. Not because you're hiding things, but because you're revealing them. In a way that creates emotional journey. And emotional journeys create emotional bonds. So don't just share. Sequence. Weave. Loop. Make your presence feel like a page turner. And she won't just listen. She'll crave the next chapter. Step 4. Emotional disarmament. Attraction without safety is manipulation. But safety without depth, that's the friend zone. The final piece of the CI, a conversation framework, is something most men never dare to touch: emotional disarmament. This is the ability to lower a woman's guard, not with charm, but with truth. Not the filtered truth, not the shiny truth, but the quiet, unguarded, fully owned truth. Here's the paradox. We spend so much time trying to appear composed, confident, bulletproof, that we forget what actually creates intimacy is the opposite. It's when we let someone see the cracks in our armor without flinching. Because when you show that you're not hiding anything, you become the safest space she's felt in months. This isn't about dumping your trauma. It's not about oversharing or being emo. It's about revealing just enough realness to break the pattern of performance. Let me explain how this works. You're in a flow. The conversation is alive. She's laughing. She's curious. You've already created emotion. You've seeded mystery. And then at just the right moment, you drop a line that disarms her. Something like, "I used to think being silent made me strong, but really it just made me lonely." Or, "There was a time I felt like I had to earn love by being perfect, and I didn't realize how exhausting that was until I stopped trying." No theatrics, no dramatics. Just realness delivered calmly, like a man who knows who he is. That moment is seismic because it invites her into your humanity. And at the same time, it invites hers to rise up in response. You're no longer performing. You're sharing space. And in that space, something remarkable happens. She feels safe enough to open too. This is the deepest kind of emotional mirroring. Not because you're digging for her secrets, but because you've shown her it's safe to be unfiltered. Let's look at what happens psychologically here. Most people, especially in early interactions, wear social armor. They posture, they protect, they perform. But when one person drops the mask, the mirror neurons in the other person respond. They say, "If he's not hiding, maybe I don't need to either." And just like that, the conversation shifts. It stops being a test. It becomes a truth exchange. Here's a practical way to do it. Start by identifying a belief or habit you used to carry that no longer serves you. One that reveals vulnerability without self-pity. Then turn it into a sentence that reveals transformation. For example, "I used to confuse being needed with being loved. Took me a long time to figure out the difference." Notice how that line tells a full emotional arc, but does it in one sentence. It invites questions. It signals growth. It contains subtle pain, but also power. Now, here's where it gets next level. If she responds with something real, if she shares something vulnerable in return, don't rush to comfort or fix it. Instead, just hold space. Say something like, "Thank you for trusting me with that," or simply, "I hear you." Those 3 words, "I hear you," and do more than 100 clever lines. Because they validate, they ground, they respect the moment. This is what separates surface-level attraction from emotional imprinting. Because when a woman feels safe, seen, and emotionally met, you stop being an interaction. You become an experience. And experiences are what we come back to again and again. So don't be afraid to drop the mask. Don't be afraid to speak from the scar, not just the success. Don't be afraid to reveal a truth that shaped you. Because the moment you do, you give her something rare, something she didn't know she was starving for. A man who leads with strength, but connects through truth. That's how you disarm her. Not by overpowering, but by showing her there's nothing to defend against. And in that space, attraction doesn't just spark, it roots. Try this tonight. Dare to start a conversation that doesn't make sense. You've made it to the end. And now you know what most men never learn. It was never about being the smartest guy in the room, or the funniest, or even the most confident. It was about resonance. The ability to create a feeling she can't explain. The ability to turn conversation into connection. To stop talking at her and start speaking to something inside her. Let's rewind. Step 1. Emotion anchoring. You created feeling. You linked it to you. You stopped being just a guy and became an emotional signal. Step 2. Curiosity hook. You planted questions instead of giving answers. You built pull instead of push. You gave her something to lean into. Step 3. Looping mystery. You made your words cinematic. Unfolding, incomplete, unforgettable. You created rhythm, and rhythm creates memory. Step 4. Emotional disarmament. You dropped the mask. You led with truth. And in doing so, you invited her to do the same. Put together, this isn't just a strategy. It's a new way of being. One that doesn't chase. One that doesn't impress. One that simply moves people by moving differently. Now, here's your challenge. Tonight, tomorrow, sometime in the next 48 hours, I want you to start a conversation that makes absolutely no logical sense. Not random, but emotionally disruptive. Something like, I have a theory that everyone's hiding one moment they still dream about. Or, what's something no one has ever asked you, but you wish they would? Say it, own it, and then listen. Not to impress, not to win, but to feel what it's like to connect through. Emotion, not information. You'll be surprised what happens. Because the moment you stop following the script, you become the moment that breaks hers. You stop being noise. You become signal. And that signal? It's unforgettable. So here's my final question to you. Are you still going to try to be liked? Or are you ready to be felt?